All right, hey there, Sam with you on a Monday. What are we? June 4th here, and I'm kind of midday, later start getting this video rolling as we're making some changes. We're trying to mix things up a little bit. We've got some new, kind of a new format we're going to roll out this week, and we'll continue with as long as we continue to get good feedback from it. So rather than go through it, I'm going to post it underneath the video so you'll see what we're doing with regards to what we're going to analyze here in video. And I want to encourage any YouTube subscribers to please go ahead if you'd like to. Please follow us on Twitter, as we're going to do some more polling and look for more. Twitter just allows for a better interaction for us with our followers and members here. So what I want to encourage you to do is, if you're interested in a particular coin, or you have a chart, or you have a count that you think warrants a look, please engage with us on Twitter. And of course, you'll find us at Trade Devils on Twitter. And again, I'll post that schedule underneath it. But just to kind of follow up on what we started over the weekend, we started just kind of asking members what they thought of Bitcoin, bullish, bearish, what their counts were. And what we're going to try and do is pull out some of the more creative charts and counts that we see, kind of work through them, see if there's anything we can maybe contribute that would help you if there's an error with regards to pure Elliott counting. But sort of the idea is to show you how we can help you and maybe engage with you and give you the opportunity to get some more influence into what we review here. So with that said, I'm just going to do a quick review here, as we've had some activity. The last video I did on Bitcoin was on Friday, so we haven't had a tremendous amount of movement since then, but we do have some. So let me just do a quick review, and then if I can work it in without this video getting too long, we'll look at some of the more interesting charts that came across over the weekend from Twitter subscribers that we just tried to engage and ask what their opinion was regards to where Bitcoin is likely to head next. So just to try and recap here, this is my primary count, the count that I've been working from with my well-documented bullish bias here. So what I'm seeing here is that we have a very complex second wave going in here, and I've worked through this many times. You can always just have a look at those videos rather than go through all of this detail here. I'm working on the assumption that I have a contender here. So it's always nothing more than a contender for a second wave to be in here relative to this low that we put in down here in April. So as you can see, for swing low to swing high, we maintain an internal correction. So we've gone deep, we've gone through the 786. So we've had, so just to review here, so from this low here up to our absolute high, we've gone through the 786. So if we're going to move off of this low, and this correction is going to stay internal, this is high probability for a wave 2. And we have all the subdivision here, even though we go complex. It maintains a contender for a second wave. Now, ideally, we'd come off of this with a good, clear, clean motive wave. And as has often been the case with Bitcoin, we're getting a little bit of a challenge here with regards to this. To what we're doing here. Is this a motive wave? Is it corrective, impulsive? Well, at this point, I think we can eliminate impulsive to some degree, but we got to dig in on it a little bit, because we have a potential for a 1-2-1-2. So it's not what you'd hope for in terms of your bullish count coming off of this. The ingredients were there for a 1-2 to go impulsive, but we don't. So we have the possibility that we're putting in a diagonal here, and we'll dig into that and take a look at it. Now we're at a technical level here, but let me just I just wanted to kind of refresh here on that in terms of this being the significant low and this being our first. So even if we just working from this chart, if I take this low and I go up to where I ran into this resistance here, if I can get it right on there. Well, we've from this pivot here, we've yet to come to the 50. But what's interesting here is if we work from the next low, we've gone right to the golden zone. So let me show you that. Now let me go down to a smaller time frame, right? So here it is. Here it is on the 15-minute where we're trying to make sense of what's happened here, right? So it wasn't easy, as is often the case with Bitcoin, particularly in the second wave. You know, this is one of those times where, you know, you either find this part of the appeal or part of the frustrating bit of Elliott wave analysis, is that you can get multiple counts that work here, and we're not going to know until we get resolution from this one way or the other, whether or not we are starting a new trend here or just in the midst of a correction that's going to take us down to, at the very least, violate this low. Would put us below 7,000, and then, of course, approaching that April low, which would change the count pretty substantially. So we certainly would no longer be looking at this as a second wave. But for the time being, this still is a contender. So let's unpack this a little bit here. Let me zoom in a little bit more here. So we did, as I said, from the polling that we did and the engagement we were working on over the weekend on Twitter, we got some really interesting counts in terms of how people are looking at this. What I see here now, and this is, I posted this to the members in the room this morning, I do see that we have some more complexity here. So as is often the case with Bitcoin, the second wave is very difficult to read. But we can get a clear 5 waves out of this. Now that one, and I went through this on the video on on last Friday. The one wave is difficult, right? So, but if we really dig in there, I had to go all the way down to a 5-minute to come up with a diagonal to give me a 1, 2. But I can get a 3, 4, and 5 to give me a 1 here. Now, it's not the fifth wave is a little tricky, and there are some people who are counting this as 3, 4, and 5 going up here, and you could make that case. But if per my count, I can get a clear ABC coming down here. So whether this is 4 and a 5, you know, it's a judgment call, really, is what it comes down to. So what I'm seeing here is that this is complete. This completes the 5-wave structure. I get an ABC into a W. I get yet another ABC into an X. And then I finish now here with another ABC. So I've got it as a WXY into a second. So but what I was showing you earlier, if I pull from this last pivot, remember algos, right, which is what I propose to you, define where the market goes. Algos don't care about an Elliott count or a complex correction or a WXY. They're just working from pivots, right? So from pivot low to pivot high, so far all I've done is come right to the golden zone where I would expect support to kick in. And we're seeing a little bit of a kick there. Now, if this breaks, that reduces the probability of this count. Right now, this is getting tested. It's held so far, but we're going to need to come out of that with some juice. We're going to need, there's the algo target. So, you know, if this is going to hold, I want to see some volume. I want to see some substantial price movement here to give me the indication that this is being defended and the attempt to break it is being rejected. So far, I don't have that. So far, we're just dabbing into that support zone here. We'll see. Now, we should know relatively quickly whether or not that's going to hold or not, and then this count may have to be reconsidered. Right now, I've got it as 1, 2, and then yet another 1, 2. And you can see the ABC that I'm working with here. We can get a 5 coming off of this B here. I can get 5 coming down to give me that C. So it remains a contender here as a 1, 2. Well, if that's 1, 2, 1, 2, well, we've got much higher prices. And you can see this as the trade here posted that we put into the room this morning, that you had a very low risk opportunity to pick up some Bitcoin here with a stop on the other side of the 65. So it's you know, you're really trying to pick the turn here, but because the risk reward is so fair, it's 19-1 if we're going up to the 1618. I think that's a trade that you can take because of the very low risk. And if we happen to catch that turn just right, and it's hard to argue with it, take the Elliott wave aside, I've got a swing low, swing high, I'm right into the golden zone. No reason not to be a buyer there, particularly since the risk is so low. So if you're watching this now, you know, depending on what time you get to this, we might have some idea as to whether or not this pivot is held here or whether these stops are going to get hit. We shall see. So that's taking what I was just showing you in terms of my bullish count and my primary count, with us finishing here into this diagonal to give us the Y wave of our second wave. And then this is that move off of the low here, the contender being this as a significant pivot, and then we're in the process of starting a new trend. Now that remains to be seen because this is so far just tenuous. We're not getting a rip out of that. Well, let's go just quickly review the bearish count as I have it. Bear with me 1 sec. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. All right, so on the bearish count, you have to allow for this very, very short C wave here because we can't argue with this 5 wave move off the low here. So this is clear as a bell. We get a clear 5. So that can be our A wave. I get an AB. I've got to allow for some truncation here in the C, and then I've got to allow for a relatively short, both in time and price range, C wave relative to the A wave. Yet, there it is. And we can get 5 in it. We don't violate any Elliott rules here. So if we're allowing for that as an ABC, that gives us the A. Here's the A wave here. Here's the B, and we're going down to try and bottom out down here to finish for a C wave here. Now, we don't know where that C is. Here, I've got it as a contender here for the Y wave. Now, note if we bottom here, so here's my algo target and the 1618, the length of the third. If we were to bottom down here, we maintain an internal retracement. Right, so we don't. If we take out this low, now all bets are off. We got to recount it. But right now, this being the bearish count still can play here and keep us within the swing low to swing high. Now we'll see. So looking there, so this is a 1 hour chart. It certainly feels like this is the more obvious count, right? So we can look at this and say, okay, well, there's 2. Well, we went just shy of the 50, right where you'd expect it. And a push down here gives us that completed C wave. So relative to this B wave here, so we'd have 1, we'd have the extension in the 1, the 2. Now we've got a very short 3, right? Which is why I've got this measured here relative to the 1. So remember, the third does not have to be the longest, simply can't be the shortest. So if we were to bottom down here where I have this hot box drawn, we're at 618, call it 62%, the length of the third projected from the fourth. So were we to bottom down here, this would be a valid count for this C wave here. As the fifth would be shorter than the third. The extension would be in the 1. And there's probably, I'm sure there are other ways we can count this. And again, that's, you either consider that part of what makes Elliott wave interesting or what makes it so annoying. I have people, and I've seen people comment under my videos that the count keeps changing. Well, so my first reaction was to say, well, I won't repeat what my first reaction is, but let's put it this way: counts are always changing. You're constantly modifying the count to accommodate the price action, right? So the fact that a count can change, show me the count that doesn't change. They're always change. We're always, it's, if you allow for the obvious pun, it's a fluid relationship. As price is moving here, we're trying to qualify and quantify it within the Elliott rule set. Right? That's what we're trying to do. And then we're using the algo pulls and those swing relationships, which I propose to you are what drive the market. We're using the Elliott wave to fit and try and tuck in behind that. So just as a review here, wave counts are constantly changing, being relabeled. If you got a problem with that, then this is not the methodology for you. All right? So if you can get a count that doesn't change, that is the exception, not the rule. Counts change all the time. So, and not to mention, we've got to maintain a bullish and a bearish count so that we're not surprised, so that we have the possibilities here for multiple outcomes. So in our bearish count here, this seems pretty straightforward. So it's the easiest one, because here I can get this as an ABC. This counts much more easily as an ABC with a rollover here at the 50 heading down to an algo target than trying to squeeze it some sort of a 1-2, 1-2. If this holds, maybe I can get this thing rolling. It just at first glance, just what's the easiest thing to see? It certainly looks like that's a corrective. This price action off of this low here, this is corrective rather than impulsive. Now, we can get a kind of a wacky count to come out of this should this pivot hold, as I just showed you. We can get a bullish count out of this, but right now, just the path of least resistance would seem to be lower. Right? Now, that doesn't mean that I'm changing my bias to bearish over bullish. I'm just showing you that you got to look at the market and evaluate based on what you see, right? So a lot of times I tell you, what do you see, not what do you think? Because you can think yourself into all sorts of problems, particularly with Elliott Wave, where it's so open to interpretation when you don't have clarity, right, as is the case with Bitcoin. So you've got to allow for these alternate counts. Right. So, but as I look at this ABC into a pivot at the 50, that seems like the most obvious count. Now, as to whether or not that 618 holds that I was just showing you over here, that could hold. Right. So you got to this requires a bit more nuance here to get this count to work for you. But it's certainly it's there. Right. You can't. I mean, there we go. Right. Elliott aside, swing low, swing high into the golden zone. Again, as I will often say, why would you not buy that? Well, if you're, and I say that not making light of any loss that you might take there, but the risk reward is so favorable. If you've got any bullish bias at all, that's a very reasonable place to be looking to add or enter the market, considering how quickly you'll know if you're right or wrong and how little you'll lose relative to how much you could, right, emphasis could, make should we get a 1-2 and we're going into a third. Right, a lot has to happen there. So I would just tell you that's a reasonable place to enter the market. Anytime I can put together a trade that's technically valid with a technical pivot like that relative to everything that I've just walked you through, that's a no-brainer for me. That's a must take, right? And I could get stopped out, right? There's no question that could get violated here, and this whole thing could move lower. But the risk reward, again, I want to focus on that. That risk reward is so favorable. I'm willing to put capital at risk there because the downside is so limited. All right, all of that said, okay, let's do a couple of things here. Now, how am I doing on time? There's 16. All right, did not want this to be terribly long because we just went through so much detail on Friday. But let me do this. One of the things that's important to do here, this is an account that I was toying with this morning because one of the things that will help you in terms of trying to identify where we are right here on the hard right edge, you've got to get a count of the entire move. So before I dig into that, let me just show you this. Now I've got to find it here, so bear with me a second. I think I put it. Bear with me a sec. There's my here's what I was after. Okay. So here, this is the daily on Bitcoin. All right. So let's get this all back put together. Okay. So bear with me a sec. Okay. So there's our daily count. So when you're not sure or you can't get a handle on the count or there's too many variables, an exercise that I strongly recommend is strip the chart bare. Take everything off of it. And just start from zero. Now, you might say, well, God, that's a pain in the ass. But it's worthwhile for a number of reasons. One, it'll force you to work through where we actually are in this count. And it'll make you rethink maybe some of your earlier assumption that you've made that we might be able to disqualify or eliminate as an alternate relative to the price action that we've seen here. So one of the first things that I'll do, just looking at this now, so this is what I had highlighted because I just wanted to walk you through this. So all I've done here, I'm going back. So we're on Bitfinex here. I'm going back to zero. That's the lowest price I can get. So if I look at that, and let me zoom back out here. So a couple things you can do. First is when you have this kind of parabolic action, going to log scale can help. Now that distorts it, understandably, right? So we compress up here, but we can get some sort of a count. I got a little compression here. Hang on a second. Let's get this back here. So if I zoom in here, all right. So if that's 1, 2, let me go back to log scale. Why this is distorting for me here. If I go down here, yeah, okay, that's zero. So let's see if I take it out of log scale. All right, that's not doing this. So it's just something to do with when I go to log scale. That was not triggering. Okay, so that's zero down here. So you can see it 0.0. Well, when we go to log scale, see, it's tempting to want to do this. Right, so remember, log is distorting. So it's tempting to go, 1, 2, okay, there's a 3, 4, 5. right? I mean, that's the obvious thing to do. Just looking at, well, I'm looking for 5. What can I find here? Well, the problem, there's a couple of problems with that. One, the fact that you're in log scale, it's distorting what your eye sees here, because the depth of this correction is much deeper than would appear based on looking at it in log scale. So if I take that low here, and we don't have to keep going over to the left, but I'll just get right. So I'm right on 0, and I go up to 0, or up to my pivot high here. Well, you can see here we've broken through the golden zone. We've broken through the 65. So the probability now, if I take this out of log scale and we look at this, the probability of this being a 4th wave is reduced because of the depth of the retracement. So that's me taking it all the way from 0. Even if I go to what I propose would be a wave 2 of the largest degree here. If we allow for that as a wave 2, then the fact that we've gone beyond the 65 reduces the probability. I guess I got to tighten this up here as well. Reduces the probability that what we have here is a 4 and that we're going up for a 5. I suppose you can't eliminate it completely, and this would make for much easier analysis here if you're allowing for this as a 4, because then we can get triangles, we can allow for more possibilities if we're trading this as a 4, but I don't think it's a 4. I think what we've got here is a 2nd. I think the 3 and the 4 are complete somewhere in here, and that this is, well, if we do it like this, this is a completed 5-wave structure. I guess I can't even see my 5th now. There you are, up here. I propose that that's completed, that we've got a 3, 4, 5 that completes. And what we're doing here, we're given the depth of that retracement, breaking the 65, is that this is a 1, 2. So in the very largest degree, if we go from 0, 1, we're putting in some sort of a 2, 3, 4, and 5 all yet to come. So if I put that in my largest, we go all the way to, we'll go to intermediate, that'll work. So I've got this as what I see here, and again, this is just about probability analysis and then taking the time to work through that count. I've got this as a 1, 2, given the depth of the retracement. Right, now you can argue with me and say that this price action looks more like a 4th. Well, you're absolutely right, it does. It does look more like a 4th, but what I'm basing that off of is depth of correction and the fact that I can complete this in 5 all the way up here to give me a completed 1 wave here. And it's more difficult, I think, to count that as a 3rd and this as a 4th than otherwise. So with all of that said, let me show that to you. I'm going to find it. So hang on a second. So let's look here. Those are my shorter terms. Here they are, longer term. Okay, so here, this is the one that I was showing you a little bit earlier. Now, I do have some of my coaches and senseis that don't agree with this count, and that's okay. It's one of the interesting things about working with really talented technicians, as I have the good fortune of doing, is that often I get differing opinion. Nobody's in there to pulling a great leader has always got it right kind of a thing. I get challenged all the time by my coaches, which is what I want. It's why I like having them in there, because they're very, very talented technicians and they give me great feedback and ideas, and they work with all of our members, and you'll find that they're very talented and will give you lots of things to think about. But back to my point at hand here, I have this completing as a 5th, which allows for this ABC, what I see here as a W. Now, the problem here for a purist, the X wave should be deeper, right? Ideally, your X wave is 80 to 90% the length of the W wave, but that's not what's happening here. So, a purist might say probability is reduced for an X wave in the same way that I'm saying probability is reduced for a 4th wave. But we don't have a perfect count. We have nothing that's perfect here. So this, I think, is a contender that I'm kind of keeping my eye on here, that we'd have a WXYX. Again, this requires a shallow X wave. Right? So if I pull from my pivot up here to my pivot low, right, we break the 65 on this side, but we're not, at 80, 90% of the prior swing to allow for that X wave. So again, purists not going to like that. I think again we deal with this ABC that I don't love the length of that C relative to the A, but technically we can't disqualify it. It just becomes a matter of probabilities. So what's the most likely outcome here? Well, if this is going A, B, and we're finishing here with a C, it's kind of interesting. I've got this trend line here offering some support that could play here. So if I take that down and we look at this count here, that would allow for that bearish, to some degree, that bearish count that I was looking at, although we had this as 1, 2, and then we were going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If this is A, and which I think is more likely, I think that we have an A, we have a B here, and now we're finishing in 5. Right? So, you know, there's a couple of ways this could be. This could be A, B, C, X, A, B, C, we're finishing. Or we'd have to allow here for this longer A wave here to be A, B, and then we're going into 5 into the C. Well, that plays. So you can look at that as potentially now. I know a lot of people see this and have this as their count. Given this perfect pivot we have up here for a fourth, we come right to the Vegas wave, right to the 50. Here comes our target down here. Here's our algo target at the 23.6. I mean, you know, it's hard to argue with it. I mean, it's certainly right there. It's certainly a contender, put it that way, right? We do have to allow for the extension in the A wave here, which I don't love, but there it is, A, B. Yeah, we can get a 3-wave B, and then we're just going down in 5. So that's relatively simple. That would give us this Z down here. So we'd have 3, 4, 5 coming into this level here. Now we may not make the algo target. The symmetry of this trend line is certainly worth noting, and I wouldn't be surprised at all. So we'd end up, we'd have a new low for the 5th. We may not make the algo target, but if we think in terms of wave relationship with our Elliott hat on, we could take the length of the 1 projected from our 4, and you can see why I have the hot box down here. That would be 100% the length of this if this is our 1 wave projected from our 4th. So we get a bit of a confluence on it. So if I extend it down to the 23.6 as an algo target, right, because this is an algo sell, all right, with no question about it. That's an algo sell with that as a target. You can see the reaction at the 50, just a swing high to a swing low, reaction at the 50, algos sell that. They will continue to defend that sell all the way to the 618. But right now, it looks like that's a pivot to pay attention to. That's the target. Now, the trend line is going to be a factor here, which is why I had the box shrunken down here. So this 100% here right at the trend line, it's hard not to get your attention that that's a very nice confluence. So we'd have the combination of wave relation, right, as we take the length of the 1 projected from the 4, 100%, perfect symmetry, equality, 1 to 5. That plays. This would finish for my Y wave here, that XZ, so I'd get XZ coming down here to complete right into that trend line. I like that possible outcome if we're going to continue to move lower and head down to that 6,800, right? But before we do that, right, remember the bullish count, we've got to break that 65 that's sitting there that has so far provided some support. We'll see if it holds, right? It's going to be tough to hold that. So this looks like a bit of a magnet down here coming back to this trend line here. So that's something to keep in mind as we work down here looking for a pivot. Right now, question is this our pivot? Which pivot holds, right? So is it this one? This is the substantial low at 5,900. This is the pivot here that inspired this impulsive move here. How we qualify it, well, we'll know better once we see what happens down here. Are we going down or are we going up, right? So it's one of the others. So either this is going down to complete this 5th, or we're in this 5th this is a pivot here that's completed, right? Because we've in the bullish count we showed the way that could work as a pivot, finishing with an ending diagonal into that pivot. Now this, right? This is why it's a cluster. It's really difficult to get a clear, clean count of whatever we're doing here. So, you know, of course, one thought is when in doubt, you know, be out, right? That's not an unreasonable place to be. The other thought is if you're willing to put small capital at risk, that entry off of the bearish count with the stop under the 65, very low risk alternative. Right, so I mean, it's just difficult here. We really don't have enough data to know what's next. It's very hard to get committed to one side or the other. So you have to kind of step back and say, well, am I committed bullish to the bullish count long term? Or am I looking for substantially lower prices? A lot of people are talking about 3,200 as a long-term target, which I showed on Friday as to how they're getting that relative to the corrective count. So there's a number of different ways that this can play. Right now, my view is I maintain my bullish bias long-term. Right? I understand that we could have this roll over one more time, but I just take it one pivot at a time. Right now, until that 65 breaks, until this breaks over here, I have no reason not to continue to maintain that bullish bias. Now, if this breaks and we start to head lower overnight, I'll rethink that. But right now, the fact that that's holding and we're getting a little price action off of that kind of supports that view. We'll see. We'll see. Now, a couple of things. How am I doing on time? That's 30 minutes. Okay, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to break here, and then I'm going to put up a second one because I don't want these to go too long. I'm going to put up a second one. I'm going to go through it, but keep it much shorter, some of the counts that were sent over to us over the weekend. So let me do that. Take note, again, just a reminder, look underneath the video. I'll have a new schedule of how we're going to approach coins and what's going to get video analysis. So have a look at that underneath the video, and I'll be back in a few minutes here with some of the counts that we got over the weekend. All right, guys, that's it for now.